A man spends his life cleaning up after others, only to inherit a crumbling farmhouse filled with junk. The town laughs, his family doubts him, but when he uncovers a secret buried for decades, everything changes. This is a story of how one man's perseverance led to a discovery worth millions, and a lesson about never judging a book by its cover. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what happens next. The janitors struggle. The fluorescent lights of Lincoln High buzz like tired insects, casting a sickly glow over the empty hallway. It was past midnight, and the only sound was the squeak of Ethan Carter's worn-out sneakers against the freshly mopped linoleum. His shoulders ached from hours of scrubbing graffiti off locker doors, his hands raw from chemical cleaners. 20 years. 20 years of the same routine. Trash bags, clogged toilets, the occasional condescending pat on the back from a teacher who barely remembered his name. Ethan wasn't bitter. At least, he told himself he wasn't. But sometimes, when he passed the framed photos of star athletes and honor students lining the walls, he wondered what it would feel like to be seen as something more than the janitor. He leaned against his mop, catching his breath. His reflection stared back at him from the dark classroom windows. A man in his early 40s, hair thinning at the temples, deep lines around his eyes that hadn't been there a decade ago. He looked older than he was. Life had a way of doing that to a person. The radio on his belt crackled to life. "Ethan, you missed the gym. Coach Reynolds says the boys left a mess after practice." He sighed. Of course they did. The basketball team treated the school like their personal dumping ground. Sweat-soaked towels, half-empty Gatorade bottles, the occasional used jockstrap just to mess with him. He'd long stopped complaining. Nobody cared. As he pushed the custodial cart toward the gym, his phone vibrated in his pocket. He almost ignored it. Who called this late? But something made him stop. The caller ID read Harrison and Low Law Firm. Ethan frowned. He didn't know any lawyers. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was crisp, professional. "Mr. Carter? This is David Harrison. I'm calling regarding the estate of your uncle, Walter Carter." Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. Uncle Walt. The man hadn't spoken to their family in over a decade. Last Ethan heard, he'd holed up on that old farm outside town, living like a hermit. "I'm sorry to inform you that Mr. Carter passed away last week," the lawyer continued. "As his only living relative, you've been named the sole beneficiary of his property." Ethan's breath caught. Property? All he remembered was a crumbling farmhouse surrounded by overgrown fields. There's got to be a mistake," he stammered. "We weren't close." "The will is quite clear," the lawyer said. "The farm is yours, along with all its contents." Ethan's mind raced. A farm, land. Maybe it was worthless. Maybe it was falling apart. But it was something, a chance, however small, to change his life. He barely slept that night. By dawn, he was in his beat-up pickup truck, heading toward the outskirts of Rustboro. The town faded behind him, replaced by rolling hills and sagging fences. And then there was the Carter farm. The house looked worse than he remembered. The porch sagged like a broken spine, the roof missing shingles. Weeds choked the front yard, and the barn leaned dangerously to one side, as if one strong wind would finish it off. Ethan stepped out of the truck, the gravel crunching under his boots. The air smelled of damp earth and decay. For a moment, he just stood there, staring. This is mine now. The front door groaned as he pushed it open. The inside was a time capsule of dust and forgotten things. Stacks of yellowed newspapers, broken furniture, an old refrigerator humming ominously in the corner. The floorboards creaked under his weight, threatening to give way. Then something caught his eye. Beneath a pile of mildewed magazines, a rusted metal box peeked out. Ethan knelt, brushing off decades of grime. The lock was broken. Inside, folded neatly, was a piece of parchment so old it felt like it might crumble at his touch. He unfolded it carefully. A map, but not just any map. This one had markings, strange symbols, coordinates, and in the corner, scribbled in faded ink, 3 words that sent a shiver down his spine. Follow the silver. Ethan's heart pounded. What had he just stumbled into? The laughing town. The morning sun bled through the grimy farmhouse windows as Ethan carefully folded the strange map and tucked it into his jacket pocket. His fingers trembled slightly, though he couldn't tell if it was from exhaustion or the electric thrill of discovery. Follow the silver. What did that even mean? He needed coffee and answers. Rustboro's Main Street was already bustling when Ethan pulled into the diner parking lot. The Sunrise Grill had been a town staple for 50 years. Cracked vinyl booths, the smell of bacon grease permanently embedded in the walls, and a rotating cast of locals who treated the place like a second living room. The bell above the door jingled as he stepped inside, and for half a second, the chatter dipped. Eyes flicked toward him. Then, just as quickly, the noise resumed. Ethan slid onto a stool at the counter. Marge, the waitress who'd worked there since he was in high school, gave him a once-over. "Well, look who's alive. Heard you got yourself a property upgrade." Her tone was light, but there was a smirk playing at the corner of her mouth. Ethan forced a smile. Guess word travels fast. "Oh, honey, in this town? Your business is everyone's business." She poured him a cup of coffee without asking. "So, what are you going to do with that old wreck? Tear it down? Sell the land?" Before he could answer, a loud laugh cut through the air. "Tear it down? With what money?" Ethan didn't need to turn to know who it was. Darrell Hanks, Lincoln High's football coach and resident loudmouth. Darrell leaned against the counter, his Letterman jacket stretched tight over his gut. "Face it, Carter. That place is a death trap. You have better luck burning it for the insurance." A few snickers rippled through the diner. Ethan's grip tightened around his coffee cup. He could feel the weight of the map in his pocket, like a secret burning a hole through the fabric. "Maybe I like a project," he said quietly. Darrell barked another laugh. "Yeah? Well, good luck with that. Last guy who lived there lost his marbles. Wouldn't surprise me if the whole place is haunted." He waggled his fingers mockingly. Marge rolled her eyes and refilled Ethan's cup. "Ignore him? But you really plan to fix that place up?" Ethan hesitated. He hadn't decided anything yet. But the map? Might as well take a look at what's there before I make any calls. Darrell snorted. "Oh, I know what's there. Rats. Mold. Probably a few skeletons." He slapped a 20 on the counter and stood. "Have fun playing handyman, Carter. Just don't come crying when the roof caves in on you." The diner door slammed behind him, leaving Ethan in a bubble of silence. A few patrons glanced at him with something between pity and amusement. Marge sighed. "Asshole." She slid a plate of eggs and toast in front of Ethan. "On the house. You look like you haven't eaten in days." Ethan muttered his thanks, his mind already drifting back to the farmhouse, to the map, to the nagging feeling that there was something there, something important waiting for him. He was halfway through his meal when his phone buzzed. A text from his brother, Mark. "Heard about Uncle Walt's place. You're not seriously keeping it, are you?" Ethan stared at the screen. He and Mark hadn't been close since their dad died. Mark had moved to the city, started some fancy tech job, and never looked back. Now, he only reached out when he thought Ethan was making a mistake. He typed back, "Haven't decided yet." 3 dots appeared. Then, sell it. Take the money and get out of that town. Nothing good ever came from clinging to the past. Ethan didn't reply. He shoved his phone back in his pocket and tossed cash onto the counter. Outside, the wind had picked up, carrying the scent of rain. He climbed into his truck and sat there for a long moment, staring at the farmhouse keys in his hand. Everyone thought he was crazy. Maybe he was. But as he turned the key in the ignition, one thought drowned out all the noise. What if they're all wrong? The tires kicked up gravel as he drove back toward the farm, toward the mystery, toward whatever was waiting for him. The first clue. Rain pattered against the farmhouse roof as Ethan spread the fragile map across the rickety kitchen table. The parchment was brittle with age, its edges fraying like old lace. In the dim glow of a single hanging bulb, the ink markings seemed to shift, squiggled lines that might have been property boundaries, an X near what looked like the old oak tree out back, and those cryptic words, "Follow the silver." Ethan exhaled, rubbing his temples. His Uncle Walt had never been the sentimental type. If he left a map, it wasn't for nostalgia. It was a trail, But to what? A gust of wind rattled the window panes. The house groaned like a living thing, settling into its bones. Ethan barely noticed. He was too busy tracing the map's lines with his fingertip, trying to decipher landmarks. The oak tree was still there, looming at the edge of the overgrown field. If the X marked a spot, he grabbed a flashlight from his toolbox and shrugged into his raincoat. The storm had turned the yard into a swamp, mud sucking at his boots as he trudged toward the tree. Lightning flickered in the distance, casting jagged shadows. The oak was ancient. Its trunk split down the middle like a giant's axe had cleaved it long ago. Ethan circled it, shining the light into the hollow where the rot had eaten through. Nothing but damp leaves and spiderwebs. Then he saw it. Wedged deep in the crevice, nearly invisible under layers of moss, was a small metal box, tarnished but unmistakably silver. His pulse kicked up as he pried it free. The latch was rusted shut, but a hard twist snapped it open. Inside lay a single key. Old, heavy, the kind that might fit a padlock or a safe. No note, no label. Just the key, cold against his palm. Ethan's mind raced. Where did it go? The barn? The cellar? He turned back toward the house, but a flicker of movement near the barn stopped him dead. A shadow. A person? Hello, he called. No answer. Just the drum of rain. Probably a stray animal. Or the wind. Still, the back of his neck prickled as he pocketed the key and hurried inside. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean. Ethan stood at the kitchen sink, scrubbing mud from a key under lukewarm water. Sleep had been impossible. Every creak of the house had sounded like footsteps. A sharp knock at the door made him jump. Sheriff Dawson stood on the porch, thumbs hooked in his belt loops. Ethan. He nodded, gaze sliding past him into the house. Heard you took possession of the place. Yeah, just getting settled. Dawson's mustache twitched. You, find anything unusual out here? The question was too casual. Ethan kept his face neutral. Just a lot of junk. Why? The sheriff shrugged. Old Walt was a private guy. Town's got some curiosity about what he left behind. Ethan's fingers curled around a key in his pocket. Nothing worth mentioning. Dawson held his stare a beat too long before nodding. Well, you need anything, you know where to find me. As the sheriff's cruiser kicked up gravel down the drive, Ethan exhaled. That wasn't a friendly visit. Dawson was looking for something. And now so was he. The key burned a hole in his pocket all the way to the barn. The padlock on the cellar doors was thick with rust, but the key slid in smooth as a secret. The lock clicked open. Darkness yawned below. Ethan's flashlight beam cut through the dust as he descended. The air smelled of damp earth and something sharper. Oil? Metal? Then the light caught it. A vault door, embedded in the back wall, half in behind cobwebs, was a steel vault straight out of a bank. And it was new. Ethan's breath came fast now. This wasn't some relic from Uncle Walt's farming days. This was recent, purposeful. His fingers found a keyhole. The key fit. The mechanism groaned as it turned. Then, a deep, resonant clunk. The vault door eased open an inch. Ethan's pulse roared in his ears as he pulled. The beam of light pierced the darkness inside, glinting off something that made his knees go weak. Because there, stacked floor to ceiling, were row after row of the vault's secret. The beam of Ethan's flashlight trembled as it swept across the vault's interior. For a moment, his brain refused to process what he was seeing. Then, all at once, the realization hit him like a punch to the gut. Gold, not just a few coins or bars. Stacks of them, neat rows of gleaming bullion, each stamped with serial numbers and purity marks. Along the back wall, wooden crates overflowed with coin tubes, their contents spilling out like metallic waterfalls. And in the far corner, something even more startling, a velvet-lined display case containing what looked like Civil War-era currency, perfectly preserved. Ethan's knees nearly gave out. He staggered forward, his fingers brushing the cold surface of a gold bar. The metal was shockingly heavy, impossibly real. This can't be happening. His Uncle Walt, the same man who'd lived off canned beans and worn the same flannel shirt for a decade, had been sitting on a fortune this whole time? A sharp clink echoed through the vault as he fumbled a coin. The sound snapped him back to reality. He needed to think. First question, how much was here? Second, far more urgent question, who else knew about this? The sheriff's sudden visit took on a new, ominous meaning. Ethan grabbed a handful of coins and shoved them into his pockets before backing out of the vault. He relocked the door, his hands shaking so badly the keys scraped metal. Upstairs, daylight streamed through the barn's broken slats, painting stripes across the dirt floor. Ethan leaned against the wall, sucking in deep breaths. He needed proof. Needed to know if this was real. His truck tires spun gravel as he peeled out toward town. Fort Knox pawn and jewelry hadn't changed since Ethan was a kid. Same buzzing neon sign. Same bell that jingled like a cartoon sound effect when he pushed through the door. Behind the counter, Lou Petrovich glanced up from polishing a pocket watch. His eyebrows shot toward his receding hairline. Ethan Carter? Hell, last time I saw you, you were stealing baseball cards from my display case. Ethan forced a laugh. And last time I saw you, you threatened to call my mom. Lou grinned, but his eyes sharpened as Ethan approached. So, what brings you in? Finally pawning that sad-looking truck of yours. Ethan hesitated. Then, slowly, he pulled a single gold coin from his pocket and slid it across the glass counter. Lou's grin vanished. He snatched the coin, pulled a loop from his vest, and examined it under the light. His breathing changed. Where, he said very quietly, did you get this? Family heirloom. Lou's laugh was brittle. Try again. This is an 1861 Double Eagle. One of the rarest. He cut himself off, looking at Ethan like he was seeing him for the first time. How many do you have? Ethan's mouth went dry. Why? Lou set the coin down with exaggerated care. Because if you walked in here with a collection, we're talking life-changing money. And because he leaned in, lowering his voice, people have been looking for coins like these for decades. A chill crawled up Ethan's spine. What people? The bell jingled. Both men turned. Sheriff Dawson filled the doorway, sunlight glinting off his badge. His gaze locked onto the coin on the counter. Well, he drawled, stepping inside. Isn't this interesting? Ethan's hand closed around the coin. Too late. Dawson's smile didn't reach his eyes. Ethan, Lou, y'all mind telling me what we've got here? The air in the shop curdled. Lou cleared his throat. Just appraising an old family piece, Sheriff. Nothing special. Dawson nodded slowly. See, that's funny, because Walter Carter didn't have any family pieces. Least none he ever mentioned. He took another step forward. And yet here you are, Ethan, not even a week after inheriting that farm, with exactly the kind of thing folks have been whispering about for years. Ethan's pulse hammered in his throat. What folks? The sheriff's hand rested casually on his belt, inches from his sidearm. The kind who remember your uncle wasn't always a hermit. The kind who know he used to run with some questionable company back in the day. His smile widened. Why don't you come down to the station? We'll talk. It wasn't a request. Ethan's mind raced. He could run, could fight, but that would make him look guilty of what? Stealing? Owning gold? Lou's fingers brushed his wrist under the counter. A silent warning. Ethan exhaled. Sure, Sheriff. Let's talk. As they stepped into blinding afternoon sun. Dawson's grip on his elbow was just a little too tight. A black SUV with tinted windows idled across the street. Ethan had one clear thought before the sheriff shoved him into the cruiser. They'd been waiting for this. The sheriff's true colors. The cruiser's backseat smelled like stale coffee and gun oil. Ethan pressed his forehead against the cool window, watching the familiar streets of Rustboro blur past. Every bump in the road made the coins in his pocket dig into his thigh, a painful reminder how fast things had spiraled out of control. Sheriff Dawson hummed under his breath as he drove, fingers tapping the steering wheel like this was just another routine patrol. But the tension in his jaw told a different story. So, Ethan said, breaking the silence, you gonna tell me what this is really about? Dawson's eyes flicked to the rear-view mirror. Just a friendly chat, Carter. Town's got a vested interest in that property of yours. Since when does the sheriff's office care about old farmhouses? Since always. The cruiser turned onto the station's gravel lot. You think your uncle just happened to die right when you inherited that place? Ethan's blood ran cold. The station was nearly empty, just Deputy Wilkins snoozing at the front desk. Dawson marched Ethan past the holding cells to a cramped interrogation room that smelled like sweat and ammonia. A single light bulb buzzed overhead. "Sit." Ethan remained standing. "Am I under arrest?" Dawson smirked. "Not yet." He tossed a manila folder onto the metal table. It slid open, revealing grainy surveillance photos of the Carter farm. Dates stamped the corners. All from the past week. "You've been watching me." "Not me." Dawson leaned in, his breath reeking of peppermints and tobacco. "See, your uncle had partners. Powerful ones. And they've been waiting years for him to crack and tell them where he hid their merchandise." Ethan's mind raced. What merchandise? The sheriff flipped to another photo, this one of the barn cellar doors. "Don't play dumb. The gold, Carter. The fortune you just stumbled into." He slammed his palm on the table. "That doesn't belong to you." A drop of sweat trickled down Ethan's spine. He thought of the black SUV. The way Dawson's hand had lingered near his gun. This wasn't about the law. This was a shakedown. "So what now?" Ethan kept his voice steady. "You kill me and take it?" Dawson laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "If I wanted you dead, you'd be in a ditch already." He pulled a burner phone from his pocket and slid it across the table. "You're going to call your brother." Ethan stiffened. "Mark? He has nothing to do with this." "Wrong." Dawson's smile turned predatory. "See, while you were mopping floors, your baby brother was digging into Walt's past. Found some interesting connections to a certain organization." He tapped the phone. "Call him. Tell him you found the vault. Then we wait." "For what?" The sheriff's radio crackled to life before he could answer. Asterisk, Unit 12, respond. "We've got a 10 to 80 at the Carter property. Multiple armed suspects on scene." Asterisk. Dawson's face went pale. Ethan didn't wait. He lunged, not for the door, but for the sheriff's holster. The gun came free with a metallic snick. "Drop it." Wilkins appeared in the doorway, service weapon drawn. Ethan didn't hesitate. He fired. The shot echoed like thunder. Wilkins crumpled, clutching his leg. Dawson roared and tackled Ethan against the wall. They crashed to the floor in a tangle of limbs, the gun skittering away. Ethan drove his elbow into Dawson's ribs. The sheriff gasped, grip loosening just enough for Ethan to scramble free. He grabbed the burner phone and bolted, past Wilkins' writhing form, to the unmanned front desk, into the blinding afternoon sun. Sirens wailed in the distance. Ethan ran. Blood and secrets. Ethan's lungs burned as he crashed through the dense underbrush behind the police station. Branches clawed at his arms, leaving thin red lines in their wake. The sirens were getting closer. He ducked behind a rotting oak, pressing his back against the rough bark. The burner phone felt like a live grenade in his pocket. Call Mark. That's what Dawson had wanted, which meant his brother was somehow at the center of this nightmare. Ethan fumbled with the phone. It rang once, twice. "Hello?" Mark's voice was tense. "It's me," Ethan hissed. A sharp intake of breath. "Jesus Christ. Ethan, are you okay?" "I just heard." "Listen carefully. I'm at the old mill outside town. Meet me there in 20 minutes. Alone." He paused. "And Mark? If I see a single cop, I'm disappearing with everything Uncle Walt left behind." He hung up before his brother could respond. The abandoned textile mill loomed like a gravestone at the edge of Rustboro Creek. Ethan slipped through a broken window, his shoes crunching on decades of shattered glass. The air smelled of mildew and rust. He didn't have to wait long. Mark appeared in the doorway, silhouetted against the fading light. Even in the gloom, Ethan could see the changes, the tailored suit, the expensive watch, the hard set of his jaw that hadn't been there when they'd last spoken 5 years ago. "You shot a deputy." Mark's voice was flat. Ethan stepped forward. "And you're working with the people who want me dead. So let's skip the family reunion." Mark flinched. "It's not like that. I was trying to protect you." He pulled a flash drive from his pocket. Uncle Walt wasn't just some hermit. He was part of an armored car heist in '98. 20 million in gold bars and rare coins. The crew turned on each other. Walt took everything and vanished. Ethan's mouth went dry. And you knew this? Not until 6 months ago. Mark's hands shook. I was digging into family history for a client and found a connection. When I realized the surviving crew members were still looking, he swallowed hard. I warned Walt. Next day, he was dead. A cold realization settled over Ethan. They killed him. Mark nodded. And now, they think you know where the rest is hidden. The rest? The vault you found? That's maybe half of it. Mark stepped closer. There's another location. Somewhere on the property. And these people, Ethan, they're not playing around. The black SUV you saw, that's... A gunshot rang out. Mark jerked forward, a dark stain blooming across his chest. Ethan barely registered the second shot whizzing past his ear. He caught his brother as he collapsed, their knees hitting the concrete together. Ethan, Mark gasped, pressing the flash drive into his hand. Run. Shadows moved in the doorway. Heavy boots crunched on glass. Ethan ran. Burned bridges. The cold night air sliced through Ethan's lungs as he sprinted to the woods, branches whipping at his face. Mark's blood still stained his hands, sticky and warm. The flash drive dug into his palm like a shard of glass. Somewhere behind him, voices shouted. Flashlight beams cut through the trees. They're hunting me. Ethan veered left toward Rusboro Creek, where the rushing water would mask his footsteps. His mind raced with fragmented thoughts. Mark collapsing, the gunshot, the shadows moving in. Who had pulled the trigger? Dawson? The men from the black SUV? He waded into the icy water, biting back a gasp as it soaked through his jeans. The current tugged at his legs as he moved downstream, away from the mill. After 50 yards, he scrambled up the opposite bank and collapsed behind a fallen log, chest heaving. The flash drive. Ethan wiped his hands on his shirt and examined it. A simple black USB with no markings. Whatever secrets it held had cost Mark dearly. He needed to see what was on it. But where? The farm was compromised. The town was crawling with enemies. Then he remembered. Lena, his high school girlfriend, now the town librarian. The one person in Rusboro who might still help him. The back door of the Rusboro Public Library creaked as Ethan slipped inside. The musty scent of old books wrapped around him like a shroud. He moved through the darkened stacks, past biographies and local histories, toward the glow of a single computer in the reference section. Lena looked up, her dark eyes widening. Ethan? Her voice was barely a whisper. My God, you're all over the news. They're saying you. I didn't shoot Mark. Ethan cut in, but someone did. He held up the flash drive. I need to see what's on this. Lena hesitated, then grabbed the drive and plugged it in. The screen flickered to life, displaying a single folder labeled WC Final. Inside were scanned newspaper clippings, police reports, and a handwritten ledger. Lena clicked on the most recent document, a scanned letter dated 2 days before Uncle Walt's death. If you're reading this, I'm gone. The cancer got me before they could. The real treasure isn't in the vault. It's in the well. Follow the silver all the way down. And Ethan trusts no one, not even family. Ethan's breath caught. The well, the old stone one behind the farmhouse, long since dried up. Lena clicked another file. A security camera still showing Sheriff Dawson shaking hands with a man in a black suit outside the Carter farm. The timestamp read 3 hours before Mark was shot. Ethan, Lena's voice trembled. This is bigger than you know. That man, he's... Headlights swept across the library windows. Lena cursed and yanked the drive free. Back door. Now! Ethan didn't argue. He was halfway to the exit when the front glass shattered. A voice roared, Carter, we know you're in here. Lena shoved a set of car keys into his hand. Blue Toyota behind the building. Go! The last thing Ethan saw before sprinting into the night was Lena reaching under the desk. For what? He didn't wait to find out. The well's secret. The blue Toyota's engine screamed as Ethan fishtailed onto the dirt road leading back to the farm. In his rear-view mirror, flashing red and blue lights converged on the library. His knuckles turned white on the steering wheel. Lena, he should never have dragged her into this. Rain began to fall, turning the road to mud. The farm silhouette emerged through the downpour. The sagging porch, the skeletal barn, and beyond it, the old stone wall barely visible through the overgrown brush. Ethan killed the headlights and rolled to a stop. He sat for a moment, listening to the rain drum against the roof. Uncle Walt's words echoed in his mind. Follow the silver all the way down. The coins. He grabbed a handful from his pocket, the ones he'd taken from a vault. Each bore the same marking. An eagle with outstretched wings. The same symbol from the map. Ethan stepped out into the storm. The well's stone rim was slick with moss and rain. He shone his flashlight into the darkness. 20 feet down, the beam reflected off standing water. Follow the silver. Ethan dropped a coin. It hit the water with a quiet plink. Nothing happened. He dropped another. Then a deep metallic clang. Not the sound of a coin hitting water. The sound of metal striking metal. Ethan's pulse quickened. He aimed the flashlight at an angle. There, just below the water's surface, something glinted. A platform. He tied the flashlight to a length of rope from the barn and lowered it. As the light pierced the murky water, the truth revealed itself. A submerged metal grate covering a tunnel leading horizontally away from the well. Another vault. Ethan was halfway over the well's edge when tires crunched on gravel. A black SUV skidded to a stop near the house. 4 men poured out, their faces obscured by balaclavas. The lead man carried a shotgun. Ethan didn't hesitate. He grabbed the rope and rappelled into the well. The icy water hit him like a punch to the chest. He took a deep breath and dove, pulling himself toward the grate. His fingers found the mechanism, a lock shaped like a coin slot. Fumbling with the remaining coins, he shoved one in. The grate didn't budge. Above, voices shouted. A flashlight beam cut through the rain, scanning the well's opening. Ethan tried another coin. Nothing. His lungs burned. The third coin clicked. The grate swung inward with a groan that sent bubbles rushing upward. Ethan kicked forward into the tunnel, just as a shotgun blast echoed from above. Pellets shredded the water where he'd been. The tunnel narrowed, then angled upward. Ethan's head broke the surface in a cavernous space. He gasped for air, his flashlight beam revealing gold, more than the vault, more than he could comprehend. Stacked crates of bullion, canvas bags overflowing with coins, and against the far wall, a steel case stenciled with military markings. But it was a skeleton propped against the nearest crate that stopped Ethan cold. The remains wore familiar tattered flannel. Uncle Walt hadn't died of cancer. He died guarding a secret. A splash echoed from the tunnel behind him. They were coming. The final reckoning. The water behind Ethan churned as the first pursuer entered the tunnel. His flashlight beam danced across the skeleton of Uncle Walt. The bullet hole in the skull, the rusted revolver still clutched in bony fingers. This wasn't a man who'd succumbed to cancer. This was an execution. Ethan lunged for the military case. The latches screamed as he wrenched them open. Inside lay 3 things. A stack of yellow documents stamped top secret. A black and white photo of Walt shaking hands with uniformed general in front of a vault door. And a detonator. A metallic clank echoed to the chamber as the first masked man surfaced, gasping for air. Ethan didn't think. He grabbed Walt's revolver and fired. The shot went wide, ricocheting off stone, but it bought him seconds. He snatched the documents as more splashes came from the tunnel. The top page bore a familiar name, Operation Silverfall, 1998. The armored car heist hadn't been a robbery. It had been a government black op. Movement to his left. Ethan spun as a gloved hand grabbed his ankle. He kicked out, connected with something solid, a guttural curse. The flashlight tumbled, casting crazed shadows as it rolled. In the strobe-like flashes, he saw it, a rusted metal door behind crates. The second pursuer surfaced, knife gleaming. Ethan fired Walt's revolver again. The hammer clicked on an empty chamber. He ran. The door screeched as he shouldered through into a narrow tunnel. Damp earth collapsed around him as he crawled forward blindly. Somewhere behind, voices shouted in frustration. He's got the files. Burn it all. Then the unmistakable whoosh of ignited gasoline. Heat licked at Ethan's back as he emerged into the storm. The farmhouse was already an inferno. Flames clawed at the night sky. Through the smoke, a figure materialized, Sheriff Dawson, his uniform streaked with soot, service weapon drawn. Should have stayed a janitor, Carter. The sheriff's finger tightened on the trigger. A gunshot rang out. Dawson staggered, a red bloom spreading across his chest. Behind him stood Lena, Mark's pistol smoking in her hands. You! Ethan choked on smoke. Later. She tossed him a set of keys. There's a plane at the airstrip. Go. What about you? Lena's smile was grim as more figures emerged from the tree line. I've been waiting 10 years to clean up my father's mess. She turned toward the approaching men, raising the pistol. Ethan ran, ashes to gold. The single-engine Cessna bucked violently as it climbed through the storm. Ethan white-knuckled the yoke, the files strewn across the co-pilot seat. Rain lashed the windshield like gunfire. Behind him, an orange glow marked where the Carter farm used to be. Lena's words echoed in his skull. My father's mess. He flipped open the top file as lightning flashed. The heading screamed in bold letters. Operation Silverfall, authorized by Deputy Director R. Coleman. Beneath it, surveillance photos showed Uncle Walt, 30 years younger, unloading gold bars from a military truck. This was no heist. The government had used Walt to move their own gold off the books. And when he tried to keep it, Ethan's radio crackled to life. Cessna 87 Alpha. This is Kansas City Center. You are ordered to land immediately at... He ripped the headset off. They'd be tracking him already, but one document still burned in his hands. A faded map with coordinates circled in red. Somewhere in the Nevada desert. A place called Site B. The engine sputtered. Ethan's gaze snapped to the fuel gauge, needle hovering on E. Lena had sent him up with just enough to disappear. Below, the storm raged over endless Missouri fields. Somewhere down there, Mark might still be alive. Lena was certainly dead. And Walt had died for the oldest sin in the book, greed. Ethan adjusted course west as the first tendrils of dawn crept across the horizon. The files said there were other sites, other stashes. The engine coughed again. He smiled for the first time in days. The game wasn't over. It had just begun. The desert calls. The Nevada desert sun burned like an oven as Ethan stepped onto the scorching sand. The Cessna had given its last gasp 50 miles back, forcing him to trek the final stretch under a relentlessly blue sky. His throat was as dry as the dust that rose with each step. But the coordinates on the map kept him moving forward. Site B. The government document had been vague, but Walt's handwritten notes in the margins told the real story. Only Coleman and I know. The rest is buried here. A low concrete structure emerged on the horizon, nearly invisible against the dunes. It looked like an abandoned Cold War military bunker, its rusted door hanging by a single hinge. Ethan pushed it open with a screech that echoed into the darkness beyond. The smell of oil and aged metal hit him. His flashlight revealed rows of cargo containers, each marked with the same symbol, an eagle over a triangle, the same symbol from the coins. The first container opened with a metallic groan. What gleamed back wasn't gold, but weapons. Crates of rifles, grenade launchers, top-tier military hardware. The second container held files, stacks and stacks of folders with names and photographs. Black Ops, offshore accounts. Holy shit, Ethan whispered. Walt hadn't just stolen gold. He'd stolen secrets. A voice behind him turned his blood to ice. Knew you'd come. Ethan turned slowly. In the doorway, wreathed in cigarette smoke, stood a man in a black suit, the same one from the photos with Dawson. His face was lined with scars that told stories of their own. Coleman, I presume. Ethan kept his hands visible, feeling the weight of Walt's revolver at his waist. The man smiled, revealing yellowed teeth. Deputy Director Coleman, actually, retired. His gaze swept over the containers. Walt and I had an arrangement. He kept our toys safe. I left his farm alone. Until you didn't. Ethan swallowed hard. You killed him. Coleman let out a rough laugh. Me? No, kid. That was your brother. Mark could always be persuasive. The world froze. Mark? The bullet to the chest. Had that been payback? So he's alive. Ethan forced the words out. Very much so. Coleman gestured, and two figures emerged from the shadows behind him. Mark with a bandage on his chest, and Lena, her face unreadable. Ethan felt the ground vanish beneath his feet. Betrayal. The final piece of the puzzle. Mark avoided his eyes. Ethan, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. Ethan silently cocked the revolver behind his back. The three of you planned this from the start. Lena raised a pistol. It doesn't have to be this way. Join us. What's here is worth more than gold. The air was thick with the scent of gunpowder and lies. Ethan looked at the abyss of secrets around him, then at the faces of those he thought he knew. When the gunshot echoed through the underground chamber, not even the desert heard his scream. The reckoning. The gunshot's echo still hung in the air when Ethan realized he hadn't fired. The bullet had come from behind Coleman. The former deputy director staggered forward, his expensive shoes slipping in the desert sand now turning dark red. His expression was one of pure astonishment as he collapsed face first onto the concrete floor. Lena stood frozen, her smoking pistol now pointed at where Coleman had been standing. Mark's mouth hung open, his bandage blooming fresh crimson. You bitch! Mark gasped, clutching his wound. Ethan didn't hesitate. He dove behind a stack of weapon crates as gunfire erupted. Lena versus Mark. Their alliance shattered in an instant. Bullets ricocheted off metal containers, filling the bunker with deafening echoes. Peering through the gaps, Ethan saw Lena take cover behind a support pillar. He was going to kill us both, she shouted over the gunfire. You knew too much. Mark's response was another volley of shots. One found its mark. Lena cried out as her left arm jerked back, her pistol clattering to the ground. Ethan saw his chance. He lunged from cover, grabbing Lena's fallen weapon while keeping Walt's revolver trained on his brother. Enough! His voice cut through the chaos. The bunker fell silent, except for the drip of blood on concrete. Mark leaned heavily against a container, his face pale. Lena clutched her wounded arm, breathing hard. You set me up, Ethan said, the pieces finally clicking. From the beginning, the inheritance, the vault, even getting shot, it was all part of the play, wasn't it? Mark gave a weak chuckle. We just needed someone dumb enough to lead us to the rest. Uncle Walt always liked you best. His eyes flicked to Lena. Didn't count on her turning, though. Lena spat blood. Coleman promised me a cut. Then I found the manifests, the names of everyone they've eliminated. Mine was next. Ethan kept both guns steady. The weight of betrayal pressed down on him. But one question burned hottest. Did you kill Uncle Walt? Mark's smile faded. No, that was all Coleman. Walt was going to give everything to you. Couldn't have that. A metallic click came from behind Ethan. He turned just in time to see Lena's good hand holding a compact pistol she'd hidden in her boot. Three things happened simultaneously. Lena fired, Mark lunged, and Ethan pulled both triggers. The explosions of gunfire merged into one deafening roar. When the smoke cleared, Mark lay motionless. Lena slumped against a pillar, a dark stain spreading across her stomach. Only Ethan remained standing. He approached the steel case Coleman had been guarding, the one marked with the eagle insignia. Inside lay a single hard drive and a list of names. Powerful names. The kind that could topple governments. The real treasure wasn't gold or weapons. It was leverage. Ethan pocketed the drive and turned toward the exit. Behind him, Lena's weak voice called out, You'll never make it out alive. He didn't look back. Watch me. As he stepped into the blinding desert sun, Ethan Carter, former janitor, unwilling heir, and now keeper of the world's most dangerous secrets, disappeared into the heat shimmer. Who was really pulling the strings? What will Ethan do with the list? Let us know if you want an explosive sequel. Smash that subscribe button and hit the bell. You won't want to miss what happens next.